At a certain level of power, reality no longer argues with you. It waits. It waits while success stacks on top of itself, while validation replaces questioning, while confidence hardens into certainty. For Mark Zuckerberg, that moment did not arrive with the announcement of the metaverse. It arrived years earlier, when Facebook stopped being challenged as an idea and began being treated as infrastructure. When a platform becomes infrastructure, it stops feeling temporary. It feels permanent, and permanence changes how decisions are made. Zuckerberg had already watched his creation reshape communication, politics, business, and identity. He had seen governments react to it. He had seen cultures reorganize around it. He had seen billions of people adapt themselves to a product he controlled. At that scale, feedback no longer feels like guidance. It feels like noise. And when feedback turns into noise, belief becomes the loudest signal. The metaverse was not born out of failure or desperation. It was born out of dominance. From Zuckerberg's perspective, the internet had already passed several irreversible thresholds. Text had become visual. Visual had become interactive. Interactive had become immersive. The next step in his mind was not speculative. It was structural. If people were already living parts of their lives online, then the logical destination was obvious. A space where presence itself could be owned. Not rented, not shared, owned. And ownership of presence meant ownership of everything built on top of it. This belief reframed money entirely. Spending was no longer about efficiency, it was about inevitability. Billions were committed before demand existed. Entire divisions were reorganized around a future that had not yet demonstrated desire. Hardware, software, and virtual environments were developed in parallel, not sequence. This is not how cautious innovation works. This is how belief behaves when protected by capital. The language inside Meta shifted. The metaverse was not an experiment, it was a transition. And transitions are not questioned, they are managed. Skepticism did not disappear inside the company, it became muted. When leadership frames an idea as destiny, disagreement feels like delay, and delay feels like betrayal. Money allowed the system to keep moving even when signals weakened. Early adoption was shallow, retention was fragile, public enthusiasm remained abstract. But these signals were not treated as warnings, they were treated as onboarding challenges. The future was always just one iteration away. This is the psychological trap of unlimited resources. Money does not correct direction, it extends it. At smaller scales, weak demand forces recalibration. At massive scales, weak demand is absorbed. Losses are framed as investment. Time is framed as patience. Silence is framed as anticipation. The metaverse assumed a future in which people wanted to replace reality, replace offices, replace physical presence, replace friction. But human behavior does not align neatly with technological ambition. Most people were not asking for replacement. They were asking for relief. They wanted tools that reduced complexity, not worlds that demanded immersion. They wanted connection that required less effort, not more. The metaverse asked users to learn, adapt, and commit without offering urgency, and urgency cannot be engineered. As development continued, the gap between vision and behavior widened. Technologically, the system improved. Psychologically, it stalled. Avatars became more detailed, but identity did not transfer. Worlds became more complex, but culture did not form. Economies were designed, but participation remained thin. Money allowed this imbalance to persist far longer than logic would normally permit, because money delays confrontation. Every quarter, losses were justified as long-term positioning. Every critique was reframed as lack of imagination. Every hesitation was answered with acceleration. More spending, more hiring, more building. But acceleration without direction is drift. And drift is one of the most expensive states an organization can enter. The deeper Meta committed, the harder retreat became. This was no longer a product decision. It was an identity decision. The company had renamed itself, reoriented its narrative, publicly declared the future. Walking away would not have been a pivot. It would have been an admission that the future had been misread. At this scale, admitting miscalculation is not a personal act, it is a historical one, and history resists being rewritten. Money continued to protect belief. The metaverse did not collapse under criticism, it dissolved under indifference. People did not revolt against it, they ignored it. And indifference is fatal to platforms. You can fix outrage, you can respond to backlash, you cannot repair absence of desire. As virtual spaces remained empty, the symbolism grew impossible to ignore. Entire digital cities without inhabitants, complex systems without rituals, infrastructure without culture. What remained was a monument to certainty. This is where the story transcends technology. Because this pattern is older than software. Empires have built cities before citizens arrived. Leaders have constructed systems assuming compliance. Organizations have invested fortunes in futures that never asked to exist. Sometimes it works. When it doesn't, the failure is not loud, it is slow. Money allows slow failure to continue quietly. Losses are absorbed, time is extended, belief is preserved, but preservation is not correction. The greatest danger of extreme success is not arrogance, it is insulation. Insulation separates belief from consequence. Zuckerberg did not ignore reality, he reinterpreted it through conviction. Weak signals became noise, disinterest became patience, silence became anticipation. Money made all of this sustainable, temporarily, but sustainability without alignment is erosion. By the time Meta publicly acknowledged recalibration, the cost had already been paid. Not only in dollars, but in momentum. Focus had fragmented, energy had diffused, opportunity had shifted elsewhere. While Meta built worlds, the rest of the industry built tools that disappeared into daily life. The future did not wait, it moved sideways. The tragedy of the metaverse is not that it was ambitious, it is that ambition was mistaken for inevitability. The future is not something you can purchase in advance, it is something you negotiate with human behavior. Negotiation requires listening. Listening requires doubt. And doubt was the one thing the system could not afford. This is why the most expensive failures are not caused by ignorance. They're caused by certainty. Certainty that scale guarantees adoption. Certainty that infrastructure creates demand. Certainty that people will follow if the path is built. But people do not follow infrastructure. They follow meaning. The metaverse offered possibility, but it did not offer necessity. And without necessity, even the most advanced systems remain empty. In the end, the metaverse did not end in collapse. It lingered as an unfinished promise, a delayed future, a digital city without citizens. And that lingering matters, because it reveals a fundamental truth about power and progress. When success removes friction, when money replaces feedback, when belief becomes immune to correction, even the smartest minds can drift far from reality. And once belief stops listening, no amount of capital can pull it back. This is Global Deep Dive, where ambition is not judged by how boldly it imagines tomorrow, but by how carefully it listens to today.